Notice to Pope, Babylon is fallen by Anna von Reitz, Sunday, October 6, 2019. Now, fully armed, locked and loaded, with the, to many people explosive knowledge, that there are three governments active in this country, and always have been, we must also realize that President of the United States refers explicitly to the CEO of the municipal United States government. Anything done by the United States that is not specifically a delegated power entrusted to it, does not in any way apply to Americans. So the USMCA treaty is just about them, not about us. However, we need to impress them and everyone else with these facts, so that we are not presumed to agree with nor to condone the USMCA treaty as anything undertaken for us, and certainly nothing we are taking responsibility for, either. We consider it nothing but a gross extension of criminality and fraud, destined for destruction. The reason that the Federal Reserve has ever been considered legal is that it is a religious institution. Yes, you heard that right. In order to make their scheme work, the Federal Reservists, members of a pagan religious order protected under the Roman Pontificate, asserted their right to contract and their right to religious freedom. They thereupon created the Reserve, defined as their blood and bodies, put a price upon these precious resources and upon their labor and upon all their interest in private and public property, and donated it all to their religious institution, the Federal Reserve. They also trademarked and created the Federal Reserve System, which they bankrupted in 2009, ending any pretense that they would be responsible for their debts, including the Federal Reserve notes that their Federal Reserve System issued as promissory notes from 1913 to 2009. Since then, we've all be passing their vacated debts around as if there was anything at all backing them, and as if there was any hope of them ever being honored by the banks issuing them. But, you say, I am not a member of this weird religion. I never even heard of it before. I most certainly never pledged my blood and body, my labor, my private property, my public lands, my children, or anything else to the Federal Reserve. But guess what? By a process of deceit and purposeful non-disclosure and even physical duress and coercion, they got your mother to donate your name to them when you were only a few days old. This resulted in an unconscionable contract, literally a contract that you were never aware of, and could not be aware of, being established in your name and granting your body and blood, your labor, your private property, your interest in the public property of this nation, your children, your marriage, and everything else including the copyright and trademark of your given name, to the perpetrators of this gross fraud scheme and breach of trust. We are in the process of repudiating all such presumptions, one by one, as millions of Americans return to and claim their birthright political status and deny any such obligation or religious connection. Meantime, those who actually, knowingly, and willfully engaged in this grotesque self-immolation and religious idolatry, have continued on and retained their character as citizens of the United States, the Pope's municipal government. That failed theocracy, which is not Christian, and which worships Mammon, is now ducking and running and collaborating with its sister organization, the International Monetary Fund, which is the bank behind the criminal UN Corp founded during the Second World War by Vichy French and Swiss Nazi collaborators. They propose to replace United States dollars with special drawing rights, also known as SDRs, all predicated on the idea that they have obtained some legitimate commercial right to draw upon, like vampires, your blood, your body, your DNA, your private property, your public property, your progeny and your labor, all functioning as collateral backing for all their debts. Shall we all stand up right now and tell President Trump and all the politicos that we never accepted any such contract? Are not members of this religious cult? And neither were any of our ancestors? Shall we tell the Federal Reserve and the IMF and the Pope and the perpetrators of this horrific enslavement scheme to go to hell? Shall we demand the return of all right, title, and interest, all patents, and all labor resources that they have fraudulently conveyed and assumed an ownership interest in? And shall we make sure that President Trump knows of our objections to his signature permitting the United States to participate in the IMF, UN Corp scheme in our names, all based upon the presumption of our donation of ourselves to their god, Mammon? Yes, I think it is most appropriate, and I think that it is necessary for all Roman Catholics to come squarely to terms with what has been done in their names too. Worship of Mammon is idolatry. Worship of Ashtoreth, aka the Statue of Liberty, is blasphemy and is worship of the great abomination, which is indeed standing where it should not stand. Worship of Nimrod Satan Poseidon is worship of a false god, known appropriately as the father of all lies. His emblem, the snake, is prominently displayed as an integral part of the Pope's auditorium design, and also entwines itself around the Pope's throne in the auditorium chamber. Roman Catholics, this cult is what has been using your church as a storefront for generations, just as it has been using our country as a storefront, and just as it proposes to use the United Nations organization as a storefront for global enslavement of mind, body, and soul. This is what we are all up against, and it must be destroyed, from within and from without. Mr. Trump has made the error of agreeing to let the United States participate in the IMF, UN Corp scheme. Perhaps he has been swayed by their arguments of freedom to contract and freedom of religion, without looking deeper and fully understanding that criminality cannot be excused as a religion. Before we all start bashing in skulls and slitting throats and chasing down Catholic priests and dismembering them in the streets and hanging nuns like grotesque black and white Christmas ornaments, which is merely our public law and the Geneva Conventions for dealing with capital-level felons, we need to take pause. Most of these people had no clue what their church was getting into, just as most Americans had no idea what was being alleged and falsified about them and their country, either. This evil cannot stand the light of day, and its intention, to enslave and suck dry the people of the entire world under the same false presumption of contract, can't either. Pope Francis needs to deeply consider not only his own future, but the future of the Roman Catholic Church under his direction, and the likely outcome of continuing this drive to attain world domination via fraud and coercion in the name of Jesus, or in the name of the United States, or in the name of the United Nations, either. If he and his pagan cohorts want to do all this evil, they can attempt it without any reference to us and without any pretense of representing us. The rest of us must confront the fact that none of this has anything to do with Jesus. Quite the opposite. It has to do with cells of Satanists embedded within the Church, within the U.S. municipal government, within our military, and within many governments worldwide. This is an ancient, venal, fecund evil which has been repeatedly suppressed ever since it first arose and led to the downfall of ancient Babylon. It's time to not only suppress it, but to utterly destroy it. If anyone is so mentally disturbed or stupid as to support a religion based on crime against oneself and one's fellow man, a religion that promotes the destruction of mankind and of all moral fiber, a religion that advocates worship of idols including Moloch and Mammon and Baal, a religion that practices infanticide, pedophilia, and cannibalism, then let them go to a mental hospital, where they belong. As for the rest of us, it's time to stand up and put Pope Francis and the Roman Catholic Church in the crosshairs and keep them there until they curl up and purge themselves of this great evil, and ditto the Federal Reserve, the IMF, the UN Corp, the United Nations Organization, the bankers en masse, and anyone, anywhere who dares to support their agenda. Mr. Trump, kindly withdraw from the USMCA treaty, and put these arrogant criminals back in their places, a very dark box where they all belong. Do not venture to further sully our names with these acts and practices. We'll put the 200 or so Americans who knowingly, willingly, supported this to death in effigy, as the original perpetrators are all physically dead. We will provide safe mental institutions for those who are intractably and incurably addicted to these practices and delusions. We will happily liquidate their corporations and put an end to this macabre bid for world domination using the Roman Catholic Church, our country, and the United Nations organization as storefronts for this profound evil. We will restructure the banks and the credit system, which is actually an easy, quick thing to do, and get the world back on track with no further ado. https://publishuda.wordpress.com/ So you think Trump W. And everyone kindly remember that none of this has anything to do with America or Americans in general. The epicenter of this evil and this fraud lies with the Pope's municipal United States government, the United States, not the United States. It remains for the Roman Catholics and the United Nations Organization members to do the same thing for themselves. They need to declare their repudiation of all these fraudulent claims and falsified documents being held against innocent people worldwide. They need to come out of Babylon or suffer Babylon's fate.